You know those history books we had in school?
Yeah.
The ones that always focus on wars and presidents?
Yeah.
They, uh, they rarely ever even mentioned all the incredible women who were quietly changing the world.
That's true.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into the lives of three extraordinary women,
Okay.
all named Belle, all of whom defied the norms of their time and left a legacy that's still with us today.
Right.
So if you've ever felt like you had to fight for your place,
Yeah.
these stories are going to really inspire you.
Yeah, it's what's fascinating is that all three of these women, though separated by time and circumstance, they all shared this spirit of quiet defiance. They didn't necessarily lead revolutions,
Right.
but they definitely carved out their own paths in fields where women, especially women of color, were not really welcome, I
Right, yeah.
think.
So let's unpack our first Belle,
Okay.
Gertrude Lyon. Now, most of us know that the Nobel Prize is a really big deal.
It is, yeah.
But imagine winning a Nobel Prize in medicine without even having a PhD. That's Gertrude.
Yeah.
She was absolutely brilliant, dedicated and determined to make a difference in the world of medicine.
Yeah, and she really turned the scientific world on its head. I mean, think about this.
Yeah.
She developed the first successful treatment for childhood leukemia.
Wow.
Before her work, a diagnosis of childhood leukemia was essentially a death sentence.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And it wasn't just leukemia. Her research led to breakthroughs in treatments for gout, lupus, malaria, and she even paved the way for organ transplants with the development of the first anti-rejection drug.
It's amazing.
It's really mind-boggling how many lives she must have touched.
Absolutely. And to fully appreciate her achievements, we really need to consider, what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
So in the mid-20th century, women in science were often relegated to, just assistant roles.
Right.
They were expected to support their male colleagues. But Gertrude, she just defied those expectations completely.
Yeah.
She rose through the ranks at Burroughs Wellcome, and she became head of experimental therapy.
Yeah, she definitely did not let anything hold her back.
Yeah.
She even started a PhD program.
Oh, wow.
But the dean gave her an ultimatum, the program or her job,
Yeah.
and she chose her work, which obviously paid off. Later in life, she received 3 honorary doctorates. And she quipped, perhaps that decision had been the right one after all.
I love that.
What I find really interesting, though, is how her lack of a formal doctorate might have influenced her approach to research.
Yeah, that's a great point. Perhaps not being confined by the, traditional academic structure allowed her to think outside the box more, to approach problems from a different angle.
Right.
And it really speaks to her pragmatism and her just unwavering focus on making a real difference in people's lives through scientific discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to our second Belle, Belle DaCosta Green. Her story is shrouded in mystery,
It is.
but it's also a powerful testament to resilience and ambition. So imagine having to reinvent your identity just to navigate a world dominated by white men.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what she did.
And she did it with incredible success. So Belle DaCosta Green, she became the personal librarian for J.P. Morgan,
Wow.
the finance titan, and she built one of the finest private libraries in the world for him.
Wow.
The story that she presented to the world was that she had Portuguese heritage
Okay.
and, seamless transition from public school to this very prestigious library job. It
Yeah.
was very carefully crafted.
Wait, so there's more to the story than meets the eye. I'm intrigued.
So the truth is that her father was the first Black man to graduate from Harvard. And Belle DaCosta Green, she chose to pass as white. She knew it was the only way she could access the opportunities that she wanted in that era.
Yeah, it just makes you think about the difficult choices that people were forced to make back then, especially women of color. To be so talented and driven, yet having to hide a part of yourself to succeed, it must have been incredibly challenging.
It must have been. But despite living this double life, she commanded respect in this very male-dominated world of rare books and scholarship. She was known for her bold personality, incredible fashion sense, which, by the way, was another way that she strategically presented herself as a powerful woman. And she had this captivating aura that just drew people in, and there were even whispers of romances
Oh,
with prominent figures, including J.P. Morgan himself.
well, I never would have guessed. Okay, I need to know more about these romances. Were they real or just rumors?
Unfortunately, separating fact from fiction with Belle de Costa Green can be difficult. There's a
Um,
lot we don't know.
okay.
But what we do know is that she was a master negotiator. She traveled the globe securing these rare books and manuscripts from Morgan's collection.
Wow.
She had this incredible eye for the extraordinary. For example, there's a story about her securing a rare Caxton edition
Wow.
the night before it was set to be auctioned off.
She sounds like a force of nature. But what happened to the library after J.P. Morgan died?
Well, Morgan's son wasn't initially interested in keeping the library. Can
Wow.
you imagine that?
All those incredible rare books almost lost.
I know. But Belle de Costa Green, ever the strategist, she convinced him not only to keep the collection, but to transform it into a public institution.
That's incredible what vision that must have taken. And what happened to her?
She became the first director of the Morgan Library,
Wow.
transforming it into this world-renowned center for scholarship, a lasting testament to her passion and dedication. And that's a perfect example of how these women, despite all these barriers that they faced, they shaped the world that we live in today.
It makes you wonder what they could have accomplished if they hadn't had to fight those battles.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe those challenges are part of what made them so extraordinary.
Maybe.
Okay, ready for our final bell.
Absolutely. So this one takes us all the way back to 18th century England, a time when slavery was still very much a reality. And yet here we have Dido Elizabeth Bell, a biracial woman raised by her great-uncle, Lord Mansfield. Who was? Lord Mansfield was the Lord Chief Justice of Britain, one of the most powerful men in the country. And he clearly cared for Dido very deeply. He provided her with an education and a privileged life. But her story is full of these contradictions.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting about Dido's life. On one hand, she's raised in this, aristocratic household, receiving an education which was unheard of for most women, let alone a woman of color at that time.
Exactly. And there's this famous portrait of Dido with her cousin, a white woman. They're depicted as near equals, which was, a radical statement for the 18th century.
Right, it really challenges our perceptions of that era.
Yeah.
But you mentioned contradictions. What do you mean by that?
Well, despite the love and care that she received, Dido was still subject to limitations because of her race. She wasn't treated entirely as an equal to her white cousin. For instance, she wasn't allowed to dine with guests. It's this complex situation, this sort of liminal space where she's both accepted and excluded.
So liminal space, for those of us who might not be familiar with the term, what does that actually mean in Dido's case?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in this context, a liminal space is this kind of in-between state.
Okay.
So Dido was part of the family, but not fully. She had privileges, but also restrictions. She belonged, but she was also an outsider. It's this gray area that really reflects the complexities of race and societal norms during that time period.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how she navigated those complexities, how
Yeah.
she felt about her position within the family and within society as a whole.
Right, we don't have her diaries or letters
Right.
to tell us definitively. But we can glean some insights from Lord Mansfield's legal decisions.
Okay.
And this is where Dido's story takes an even more fascinating turn. So remember, Lord Mansfield presided over the Somerset case, a landmark ruling that declared slavery illegal in England.
Right, and that was a huge turning point in the fight against slavery.
Yeah.
But how does that connect back to Dido?
Well, it's impossible to say for certain whether her presence in his life directly influenced his decision.
Right.
But it's definitely a question worth pondering. Did Dido's lived experience challenge Lord Mansfield's views on race and slavery? Did their relationship, her very existence in his home, shape his thinking on this really crucial issue?
It's a tantalizing thought. We may never know the full extent of her influence, but it's clear that Dido's story forces us to consider the impact that personal relationships can have on even the most significant legal and societal shifts.
Absolutely. And it highlights how individual lives can challenge these deeply ingrained prejudices. Sometimes simply existing, being present, can be a powerful act of defiance. Dido's story is a reminder that change often happens in these subtle ways, through personal connections and individual acts of courage.
After Lord Mansfield passed away, Dido received a substantial inheritance, and she went on to marry and have a family of her own. Despite all the mysteries surrounding her life, her story offers us this glimpse into a pivotal moment in history and reminds us that love and acceptance can exist even in the face of societal prejudice.
It's really inspiring to see how each of these women, in their own way, redefined what it meant to be a woman in their respective eras. They weren't afraid to break the mold, challenge conventions, and live life on their own terms.
Yeah, it's like they're sending a message across time saying, hey, you got this. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do.
Exactly, and it doesn't always have to be about, grand achievements or global recognition. Sometimes it's about these smaller acts of defiance, pursuing an unconventional career path, speaking up for what you believe in, simply refusing to conform to expectations that don't resonate with you.
I love that. It reminds me of that quote, well-behaved women seldom make history. Our three bells truly embody that spirit. They weren't afraid to break the mold, to challenge conventions, and to live life on their own terms.
And that's a powerful legacy to leave behind. They inspire us to question assumptions, to push boundaries, and to embrace our individuality. It's a reminder that history is made not just by those in the spotlight, but by countless individuals who dare to be different, to challenge the norm, to create their own narratives.
Exactly. And thinking about our listeners, someone who's lived through quite a few societal changes and challenges themselves, what do you think their takeaway should be from these stories?
I think it's a message of hope and resilience, a reminder that it's never too late to pursue your passions, to challenge the status quo, to make a difference. These bells faced incredible obstacles, but they never gave up on their dreams. They persevered, they adapted, and they ultimately triumphed. And their stories show us that limitations are often self-imposed. And with courage and determination, we can all achieve amazing things.
Beautifully said. Their lives are proof that even when faced with societal pressures, personal fulfillment and leaving a positive mark on the world is possible.
Yeah.
I think that's an incredibly empowering message for anyone at any age. It's easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day and forget about the bigger picture.
It is, yeah.
But these stories, they really remind us that each of us has the power to make a difference, no matter how small it might seem.
Exactly. And sometimes those seemingly small acts of courage, they can have this ripple effect and create lasting change. Think about Gertrude Elian's dedication to research that led to these life-saving treatments. Or Belle de Costa Green and her vision for transforming that private collection into a public treasure.
Right.
And then Dido simply by existing,
Yeah.
challenging the very fabric of those societal norms.
Yeah. Their stories are proof that we don't have to be famous or hold these positions of power to have an impact. Sometimes it's about those personal triumphs, those moments where we stand up for what we believe in, even when it's really difficult.
It's about, finding your own way to defy expectations, whether that's in your career, in your relationships, or just in how you choose to live your life.
Right. So here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
What seemingly insurmountable obstacles have you encountered in your own life? What dreams have you put on hold?
Yeah.
What voices have you silenced? What paths have you been hesitant to explore?
What would it look like to channel the spirit of these three bells, to embrace their courage and tenacity? Maybe it's time to revisit that dream, to speak your truth, to take that first step towards creating the life you truly desire.
Limitations, they're often self-imposed. And just like our three bells, with a little daring, we can all reshape our destinies.
And who knows? You might just inspire others to do the same.
That's it for this deep dive into the lives of three incredible women named Belle. We hope their stories have inspired you to embrace your own unique path and to never underestimate your power to make a difference. For more fascinating stories and explorations into the depths of knowledge, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep diving.